Okay, I got my purse, my bag, what am I missing? My keys. Didn't want to be on time anyway. Ooh. Come on. Hey everyone, I'm Juliet and I have had type 1 diabetes since I was 8 years old. I'm 19 now, so if you do the math, that's 11 years. Almost 20, so it's almost 12 years. After a couple of years of taking shots, my parents and I decided that we would transition into the pump life. So if you're watching this video, you're probably either about to get the Omnipod, or you're new to the Omnipod, or you're exploring ideas, or you know what, maybe you're just a non-diet buccaneer too, I don't know. If you're watching this video, thank you. I love these pods. I've been on these pods for almost 9 years? Yeah. Oh my god, I'm getting old. I've been on the Omnipod, I think, for almost 9 years. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it's almost 9 years. Yeah, that's weird. One of the big reasons I love the Omnipod is because when it's on, or in my skin, I should say, because there is a little cannula there, but when it's in my skin, I don't really feel it that much. Yes, there's a little pinch when it goes in because the needle actually does go in and then retracts and leaves a small little tube. But when it's there, after a few minutes, you don't feel it anymore. And I absolutely love that because then you kind of forget that you're wearing anything. You kind of forget that you have type 1 diabetes. And no, you shouldn't forget that you have type 1 diabetes because you have responsibilities. But you're no longer focusing on taking 6 to 7 shots a day, and you have something on your body that helps you with that. So a few things about the Omnipod before we get started. If you hear a flat line ringing noise, that means your pod is out of insulin and needs to be changed. Or it means that there's a malfunction in your pod, which also means it needs to be changed. If you hear a few beeps, it's an alert of some sort telling you that you probably are looking for a pump change coming soon. Just be mindful of all the little beeps. These pods, they last 3 days. After 3 days is up, you're going to have to peel it off and you're going to have to activate a new pod and put it on. Before you start a pump change, make sure your pod is deactivated. So, let me show y'all how to do that real quick. After you've turned your PDM on, you're going to scroll down to more actions, and then you're going to press change pod. Once you get there, you're going to confirm, so that way your pod that you're currently wearing deactivates. So with the old pod deactivated, we can actually peel it off now and move on to the next steps, which include the new pod. Pulling the pod off is like pulling off a band-aid. So if you stick it on a really hairy part of your body, it's going to hurt a little bit. I like to pick out a little spot on the underside of the pump just so that it doesn't feel wonky when I pull it off, because if you pull it by the top, the cannula feels a little weird. Yeah, that little guy. But it peels right off, and then just wipe it down with alcohol and you're good to go. There are a few things you're going to need in order to pull off a successful pump change, which includes, pause for dramatic effect, a PDM, personal diabetes manager, insulin, of course, a pump kit, and some alcohol wipes. So a little pre-game before we actually get into the pump change. I like to take an alcohol wipe and wipe down the top of my vial of insulin. That way it's good and clean. Now at this point in the game, you've probably already deactivated your pod. So if you've done that, your PDM will probably ask you if you'd like to activate a new one. Once you press yes, it's going to prompt you to open up a pump kit and fill a new pod with insulin. So your pump kit is going to be a sterile package, and it's going to consist of a pod and a needle syringe and plunger. Assembling the needle is actually quite easy. Just take the needle and the plunger and push them together and twist. And voila, you have a working needle. Now take your assembled syringe and your vial of insulin, and we are now going to draw out some insulin. Once your pod is activated, it will last for 3 days until it prompts you to change it to a new one. So draw out however much insulin you think will last you for 3 days. Now in order to activate the Omnipod, you do have to have a minimum of 100 units in the pod. It can take a maximum of 200 units. So keep in mind, if you do go through more than 200 units within a 3-day period, you are going to have to change your pump sooner, because you cannot refill your pod while it's on. If you do see some bubbles in your syringe after you pulled out some insulin, just hold your syringe upright and give it a few flicks. This will cause all of the bubbles to move to the top of the needle, and that way you can gently push out the excess air. Trust me, you do not want any bubbles in your pump. Now for the actual filling of the pod. On the underside of the pod, you're going to notice this little arrow that points to this little hole. The hole is actually where your insulin is going to go into. So push this needle into the hole and gently push down all the insulin into the pod. You're going to hear 2 beeps. The 2 beeps will let you know that the pod is ready to be activated. After filling the pod with insulin and hearing the 2 beeps, you're going to press next on your PDM. If your PDM is too far away from your pod, it might beep at you. No biggie, I get beeped at all the time. Just move it a little closer to the PDM so that way they can communicate. During this step, your PDM is going to prime your pod so that way you are ready for needle insertion. The next step is going to involve removing the needle cap. The needle cap is this hard piece of plastic that covers where your needle is going to come out. Just put your thumb and your index finger around it and pull up hard. It's going to feel like you're breaking it, but trust me, you are not. You're going to want to make sure that there is no needle sticking out at this time, because that can show that there's a malfunction in the pod. Once you've decided an area that you want to place your pod at, make sure you wipe it down thoroughly with an alcohol wipe so that way your skin is clean. Give it a few seconds to dry, and then you're ready to apply your pump. Remove the adhesive backing on the back of the pod, and be sure that the tape does not fold over on itself, because if it does, it's really hard to get it apart. Pick a good spot and gently place the pod on your skin, and then just smooth out all the tape so that way it's firmly sticking to your skin. When you press start to start the needle insertion, the needle will not go in right away. You're going to hear a few ticks first, and then it will go in. I like to pinch the skin around my pump and gently press down on the pod to add a little bit more cushion for the needle insertion. Now that the new pod is actually on, I highly recommend not getting it wet for like at least a few hours. Now the pods are waterproof. However, if you jump in the shower right after changing it, it will peel right off. Don't know why a couple hours does the trick of it actually sticking, but trust me, it does. Another thing I want to touch on is placement of the pods. So for this video, I did put the new pod on my stomach. However, it can also go on the back of your arms, like I was wearing it in the beginning of this video. You can also put it on your, like the front of your leg, the thigh area. You can put it on the small of your back, or, this is my favorite one, you can put it on your butt. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Let me just tell you, so many questions come to mind. If you have put it on your butt before, please leave a comment down below and tell me how it was, because I'm quite curious. A lot of questions there. Thanks again for watching my video. I hope y'all liked it. I enjoyed making it. So, until next time.